Despite all the scientific and technological progress, mankind has not found a way to coexist peacefully with each other. Wars on the planet are continually being waged, and weapons are becoming even more dangerous. It's like different countries are competing to see who can come up with the best way to destroy each other. Today we compare the armies of North Korea and South Korea, as well as the military might of India, China, and the United States. We also talk about North Korea's latest nuclear tests and why these nuclear tests are closely tied to China. Watch this video until the end to find out which army is the strongest in the world. You're on the Karo Show channel. Enjoy watching. North Korea's army is the most mysterious and hidden army in the world. Since North Korea is the most closed country in the world, data on the state of North Korea's economy is classified, and even less is known about the state of the army. In terms of the severity of the regime, it is a totalitarian state that surpasses even the Soviet Union of Stalin's regime. Today, North Korea has one of the strongest armies in the world, with a strength of 1 million men. And that's just the active service members, with another 6 million in the reserves. In North Korea, people are not given a choice. Every citizen is obliged to serve in the military unless he or she has a very good reason not to. Women must serve 7 years and men 10. They have numerous air forces, ballistic missiles, and a powerful submarine fleet. By the way, in April of this year, North Korea tested a new underwater drone capable of carrying nuclear weapons. This was reported by a number of Western publications. It is claimed that the warhead can surreptitiously reach the operational zone, using an explosion to cause a superpowered tsunami. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un watched the process. The test of the device was a kind of response to the joint exercises of the United States and South Korea, which Pyongyang believes create a certain tension in the region. Many experts doubt that North Korea has such technology, but there was an interesting article in recent leaked Pentagon documents in which one source claimed that China may have shared technology with North Korea, thereby creating a secret nuclear alliance. Whether this is true or not, we will find out in time, but either way it is very disturbing news. North Korea's military might can be judged by the military parades that Kim Jong-un is very fond of staging. It is indeed an impressive spectacle. However, the reality is not as good as the parade. The North Korean authorities demand a lot from the soldiers, but don't care about them at all. The health conditions of most of the soldiers are extremely poor, and the conditions created for them in the army are in many ways even worse than those of prisoners in civilized countries. They are fed raw corn or potatoes, but only a couple of potatoes per man. It is interesting that even during peacetime, when North Korea is not at war with anyone, the army is losing soldiers. Not everyone can withstand the rigors of the army. Some die right during the service. It is no secret that civilized countries do not want North Korea among their partners and allies, but that doesn't seem to bother Kim Jong-un too much. The main thing for him is to make North Korea feared, and he has succeeded in achieving that goal, mostly thanks to uncoordinated nuclear weapons tests. The behavior of the country's leader is very difficult to predict, and this fact only increases the anxiety about North Korea, especially when some shocking facts come to light. For example, in 2017, soldiers were ordered to throw mines into the Yellow Sea, supposedly to kill Americans who were about to attack. As a result, the mines washed ashore and killed 110 North Koreans. The soldiers of North Korea must be constantly on guard, because in their opinion the enemy will attack their great country as soon as they feel weak. South Korea and its patron America are considered to be North Korea's main enemies, but the enemy still does not attack, and Kim Jong-un himself has enough prudence not to attack anyone. Interestingly, the country develops its own military equipment and sells it to Egypt, Syria, Pakistan, and Yemen. South Korea's army consists of ground forces of the Navy and Air Force and is manned on a conscription basis. The ground forces have about 2,500 tanks. Of these, there are about 80 T-80 tanks that Russia gave to South Korea in the mid-1990s. There are also self-made tanks, such as the Black Panther. But the bulk of them are K-1 tanks, created as a kind of analog of the American Abrams. There are also old American Abrams tanks in service. South Korea is developing its own missile forces. The army currently has tactical missiles of its own production. The Hanmu-1 is a mobile missile with a range of 180 kilometers. Gunmu-2A is a silo-based missile with a range of up to 300 kilometers. The Air Force has some 700 aircraft of various purposes. Among them are the latest generations of American fighters F-15 and F-16. The Navy operates about 150 warships and submarines. Technologically and economically, South Korea has long surpassed its northern neighbors. However, due to the presence of North Korea's nuclear weapons, it is unlikely that South Korea will soon decide on active military action. India is a vast and populous country with a rapidly growing economy. It has an army of 1,350,000 men. This is despite the fact that there is no compulsory conscription in the country. India spends $67 billion a year on military expenditures. The country is in constant confrontation with China over disputed territory. The history of the conflict goes back to the time of the British Empire. The armed forces of independent India emerged in 1947 on the basis of military units of the British Empire. The army consists of air and naval forces. There are also a variety of paramilitary formations, such as the National Security Forces and Special Border Guards. Tank fleet in full combat readiness contains about 4,000 tanks. Some of these tanks are their own production. There are also modern Russian T-90 and Soviet-made T-72 tanks. The missile forces possess medium and short-range ballistic missiles. India also has a limited stockpile of nuclear charges. About 35 of them are now on alert. India's air defense consists mainly of Soviet-made weapons, but it also has a small percentage of Israeli anti-aircraft systems. In terms of mobilization readiness and availability of modern weapons, the army is ready to perform various defense functions for the country. India has close military technical cooperation with France, Britain, and the United States. Interestingly, the Indian Special Forces fighters are selected by height. Then they go through a system of very difficult tests, and only then proceed to the grueling training. The People's Liberation Army of China has the largest ground army in the world. The number of personnel is 2,300,000 people. China's military budget is $250 billion, second only to the U.S. military budget. This amount allows them to raise their level and improve their military equipment. The Chinese have long proved to the world that they are first on the digital front. But believe me, they know how to produce not only smartphones. Despite the fact that China is the most populous country, they are not going to fight in numbers, but to improve the military equipment. This army is feared in the East and in the West. China has ultra-modern fighters and a powerful navy, as well as nuclear weapons. But the Chinese have always been too smart to just throw shells at their opponents. The focus of the army is on cyber troops, which strike not at the enemy's armed forces, but at their systems. Destroying equipment and even infantry is incredibly expensive and comes with its own substantial losses. It is much more practical to use a digital resource. After all, armies today are monstrously dependent on information systems, such as command and control systems, intelligence, data exchange, communications, firefighting, and the like. Engaging the resource of electronic warfare and even psychological influence can wreak havoc on enemy command. China's Strategic Support Force was established in 2015. They include everything related to space forces and electronic warfare. There is also a separate department responsible for cyber warfare, namely the Department of Network Systems. China has decided to learn from others' mistakes and not to make their own mistakes. Having analyzed the experience of other countries, the Chinese have come to the conclusion that instead of taking part in the arms race, it would be much more effective to impose another format of confrontation and make the enemy play by its own rules. Any military power can be neutralized simply by hacking the control system. The flow of information in the systems, disinformation, synchronization. Perhaps cyber warfare will soon move into a new generation of warfare, or perhaps cyber warfare is already going on today. What do you think about this? Write your opinion in the comments. But don't think that if China relies on intelligence, then Chinese soldiers are weaker than the rest. That is not true at all. In the army, Chinese soldiers train very hard, so it is almost impossible to find a weak spot in the Chinese. World War II was the worst tragedy of the last century. When Nazi Germany finally capitulated, the whole world exhaled. It seemed that now we could finally live together in peace and joy. But very soon the Soviet Union saw its former allies as enemies. An arms race between America and the Soviet Union began, which was called the Cold War. In 1949, the military bloc NATO was formed and included 12 countries. The solemn signing of the act establishing the North Atlantic Alliance took place in Washington. The main task of NATO was to create a system of collective security. The most important article in the North Atlantic Treaty was Article 5 on collective defense. It stated that an attack on any NATO member country of the alliance would automatically be equated with an attack on the entire alliance. NATO currently includes 31 countries, and several more states are candidates. The bloc aims not only to protect member states but also to fight terrorism in the world and the spread of mass weapons and reduce the threat posed by rogue nations. By far the strongest army is the U.S. Army. The Global Firepower recently published a list of the strongest military forces in the world, and it is not difficult to guess that the first place went to the United States. The rating is based on the analysis of available weapons, available facilities, human resources, the level of military training, financial stability, and many other indicators. For 150 years, the United States has never allowed a war on its territory. The U.S. Army is second only to China in the number of troops. It has 1,380,000 soldiers. The military budget is $750 billion. Generals in other armies can only dream of such a sum. It is the budget that allows Americans to develop and purchase the most modern weapons. The U.S. Navy currently has 11 nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, more than 70 submarines, and a huge number of support ships. And this is only a small part of the military power that America has. Write in the comments which army in the world do you consider the most powerful and why. We will be interested to know your opinion. And that's all for today. Subscribe to the Karo Show channel and watch our previous videos. Goodbye.